Hello and welcome back to the workshop, the Folklore Hiking Stick Workshop. We're not talking about hiking sticks. What we're talking about here is bushcraft knives and the ones I've forged, and where I'm going with this, I was going to say project, but it's actually a little bit of a hobby of mine. I've described and I've shown how I go about forging my bushcraft knives, and it's an extremely primitive and inefficient way to do it, but I'm still able to do it, and in some way it kind of recreates that message that people from years gone by, how they were able to do what they did, metal smithing, forging, and in reality smelting ores to get the raw product to turn into things they used, and at which we still dig up, well, archaeologists dig up and find. Yeah, I've become a little bit fascinated with it, and a little bit fascinated around the horseshoes that I'm actually forging, for no other reason than that I have about 3 containers underneath my benches and that full of horseshoes. I have hundreds of them. They were going to be for a craft project we were doing when we were selling tulips in plant pots. There's a little clue what we were going to do with them, but that didn't materialize. So I've been left with hundreds of horseshoes. They've been kicking around, but yeah, so I've actually forged some knives. To cut a long story short, I'll let you have a look at the progression and where I am, but I am missing one, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So there's one container and it's full to the brim of horseshoes, but I've got an even bigger one over underneath my main workbench. So there you go, that one there, I can't even pull it, it is solid. That is just stuffed full of horseshoes all the way along. There's got to be a couple hundred in there, and it's overflowing to the point I've even got them down there as well. So there you go, there's some horseshoes, and you can evidently see the one I've been using, the first one I ever forged. And this one here, straight as a die. It's as sharp as I need it, or how sharp I can get it. I sharpen it most times before I use it and go off out into, you know, the outdoors, bushcrafting and doing my shelter builds. But there was one that would sit in between there. I've had to cut that up because there was too many features that possibly would have put me on the wrong side of the law so far as the new UK laws. Not intentionally forged that way, but unfortunately with all these holes, and I had some of them in my blade, and we'll describe in a minute that in fact my blade ran into what could be considered a blade but just dull along the handle, and with the length there was too many variables that could have put me on the wrong side of the law. So before the date was up, which they said that you had to hand them in or destroy them, I destroyed it. So yeah, so I'm missing one. That's my first one. Second one's gone. That's my third one. And this one here is a lovely knife. I've still to do a bit of work to it, and I've stopped working on it for one simple reason. It looks straight down that way, although you might see it veer off a little bit. I've got to get this one cherry red, and I need to straighten that blade just that little bit more. It goes off to my left hand side a little bit. I didn't see that. I think it might have happened when it cooled down. But I've polished it up to give it, to just see how, and I shaped it. I've shaped the blade. I've put a stop there so it defines the handle. So, and I've took a bit of the runoff from the lower part of the horseshoe off, so you can clearly identify there is a handle here. The problem I had with my other one, if you look at this horseshoe, you can see there's a very dull edge on the inside. Not sharp, but it could have been misconstrued as a, well, part of the blade, just it was dull. So yeah, that caused me a few issues. To note, you'll see the back of this horseshoe has been worn away, and you can see the evidence of that on this knife here. You can see that on the top part of the blade. That's not me, that's just the metal that I'm working with. The imperfections, and that would be what's happened there. You can see on that horseshoe, retrospectively, matches my blade there. So because you're working with the raw product which is used, and not only used, it's been dragged over floors, tarmac, and used by the horses on rough ground, it's been pitted, it's rusted, it's damaged, you will never produce a perfect, you know, 400-pound bushcraft knife. These are novelty knives. And then that'll bring me on to the next subject of the material itself. Right then, this is a blank I've forged, and I'm going to shape another knife out of it with the grinder. I haven't got round to it because I've been caught up with hiking sticks. And this is only a hobby, so I can't afford to put too much time, only when I got a spare bit of time. And I do need to cut this one, and then I'll have to heat treat it. While I'm doing the heat treat, I'll straighten this, and I'll have to heat treat it again. But that will bring me on to the subject of heat treating. It has been said before, and it's been noted, that is it worth heat treating metal that's come from horseshoes? Quite simply because it's not of a quality to make blades or anything of a sharp, requires a hard, sharp edge. You really need to be going into the various degrees of carbon steel. Now, most people who've got even a passing interest in tools in general, or when they start thinking about forging, will already know about the fact not all steel is created equal. Steel, you know, can be created to have spring, which would be leaf springs in lorries. And some will have like hardness, some will be a shock resistant. All steel has different properties, and it's got a blend of other constituents in it to give the quality you're looking for. And most tools, tool steels have carbon at various amounts and degrees to give the hardness required. That brings me to the horseshoe. That doesn't really need to be hard. In fact, it's probably better in plain steel like it is, where it can actually mold to the ground the horse is going to be working on. Because a horse, like us with our shoes, you notice if you take your shoe off, you're walking slightly funny on one foot than the other, and it'll wear down on a particular side. That's probably a good advantage to a horseshoe. And indeed, the horseshoes that I look at, you can almost start to have a look and think, oh, that horse has been pulling more to that side of the horseshoe than another side. And you don't have to be too advanced in that. You don't have to be a farrier to see that sometimes horseshoes are wore down more on one side than the other. So yeah, there's not a lot of carbon in these, if any. So heat treating is a bit of a gamble. Is it worth doing? Is it not? I heat treat because, quite simply, from my research, even heat treating ordinary steel can help give it a degree, a small percentage more of hardness than not heat treating. And that's why I do it. I have no idea what I've got here. Like I said, I'm just pulling it out from a box. It may have a little bit of carbon in it, it may not, but I'm heat treating them anyway. And for me, when I did cut that other one up, there are certain parts of the blade that really I could tell the difference going through. It felt like the steel was harder. Was I imagining that? I don't know, but it did feel certain parts of the steel were harder. So whether the heat treatment had hardened parts of the blade that little bit more than others, I don't know. I could be making that up. But in any case, this one here is a blank. I've shaped it. As you can see, I've moved away a little bit from the straight handle because quite simply I realise, because you don't have a big round handle on these, that it just sits that little bit better in your hand like that. You can apply more downward force and the hook goes into the palm and your fingers wrap around it that little bit much more nicer, as you can see there demonstrated. You're probably already thinking that you know, why is it this shape? Why didn't I leave a bit more metal on it? Because as you can see, I've managed to pancake it out and forge it into a nice, well, this would be, I'll be able to grind that and get a nice sharp edge on the front here. It's come out quite well, but it's only going to be about a 2.5 inch blade, because I've got to try and avoid this hole here, and I've got to come up to the front, and where you see the line the actual nails would have been in, they would start over here. It's obviously quite thin there, so I've got to come back a little bit on that. So yeah, is it worth doing it for, you know, making a knife out of this, a 2.5 inch blade? Yes, because for me it's time, it's free, and like I said, they feel nice in the hand. It's a novelty item, and on top of that, I do like all the folklore surrounding horseshoes, that, you know, it protects against evil. Some entities, you know, won't cross you if you have horseshoe or steel on you. The little people of folklore, you know, are frightened of horseshoes. And it can be like a good luck charm as well. So yeah, I do like that, and you're forging a knife from it. But yeah, that one's come out very well. As you can probably see how I've managed to pancake that blade out where it's nice and fat there, and it rolls down into a nice point. So I should be able to, you know, shape out a nice knife blade from that. Once I've done that, hopefully I'll get it to a point like this one here. I'll have to heat treat it, and as you can see there, I'm quite happy with this one. That is as straight as I could get it before I actually started putting a grinder to grind off the edges. I wanted to keep the authenticity of it being a horseshoe. And yet again, you could spend hours trying to produce a knife out of a poor quality steel, and at the end of the day, you've got the same as what I would have here, just a simple horseshoe knife. And that's all people, even online, state that's all you're going to get, is a poor quality knife. But it's a novelty item, but they do work. You can sharpen them up. I've been using this one out when I'm wild camping and that, and yes, it dulls probably twice as fast as a carbon blade. But yet again, for me, about 2 or 3 passes over the actual grind and over the actual blade, I've got an edge back, and that'll see me for another 2 or 3 occasions out in the out wild camping or out in the forest. And I have time, and I enjoy doing this. So here's my blades before we have a look at some used horseshoes, because it's the used horseshoe which will dictate what you can make from it. As you can see, I've got a hole there, but I've been able to extract a good length of metal out of that horseshoe. Let's have a look. Nearly 4 inches there. This one here, usable blade, possibly 2.5. I may be lucky to squeeze 3 or just under 3 at a push. This one here, what's that? That's 1, 2, just over 3 inches. So you can't make anything other than what the raw product will let you do. You can see this one here, the horseshoe holes come up to there. So from, well, there it is, that one's just filled in. So you have that amount of metal that you'll be able to forge your blade. Yet, If you get a smaller one, you can see this one here, the holes start here. You've only got about 1.5 inches. So it probably wouldn't be worth trying to forge anything from this particular horseshoe. Yet again, coming back to this one, all horseshoes are different styles and shapes. You've got to remember that. The last hole finishes here over to here. So you've got a fair bit of metal. You'd have to take that tab off, but you can see where it's wore down there. You can see how thick that horseshoe is there. So when you pancake it out, you can increase that length slightly by flattening it and driving the metal out when you're forging. So the initial first stage of horseshoe that you're going to work is quite important. It'll give you not only the quality and thickness of the actual blade, but on top of that, what you can actually shape the blade to be. So by now there's probably a serious knife maker that would have accidentally stumbled upon this video and is absolutely laughing his head off at what I'm trying to achieve here. I fully understand that, and this here holds no monetary value to anybody else. The simple fact is you can buy a reasonable quality bushcraft knife for just over £20, I believe, like a Mora blade. So why would anybody want, to come and, even think about purchasing this? They're not going to, because quite simply, most people will understand it's come from a horseshoe, which is discardable rubbish. The steel ain't no good. And most people probably don't buy into the novelty factor of this item. For me, it's different, and I do know there is a raft of people that do make horseshoe knives. And in the States, stateside, it is quite a thing. People, particularly amateurs, do enjoy forging bushcraft knives themselves, and they do sell them incidentally at craft fairs and sales and things like that, and they hold some sort of value over there. Not much, but here, by the time I was to fire my forge, produce this item with my grinding wheels, put the time sharpening it, and sanding it all out, then had to have insurance, liability insurance, to sell the item, and everything that I'd need to have to do it, the postage of it, because you couldn't just post it through ordinary post. It just financially isn't worth my while. In fact, I would have to give this away to somebody, and even then I would have to be paying to give it to somebody. So in effect, this is a hobby really for me. I've looked at thinking, could I actually make, because could there be somebody out there who has just a fascination with a hand-forged bushcraft knife from a horseshoe? Simply, even if it was just for the good luck charm of it. But no, I couldn't make this financially worthwhile. And you can buy a good quality bushcraft knife for around 20 quid, I think. So this here, trying to sell it's redundant, and I wouldn't sell it. This is a treasured item. I was gutted to have to cut my other one up. I'm really chuffed with this one, and I can't wait to get this one out into the field and start using it as my primary bushcraft knife. This one here, I will probably bring you along when I've got time, and I'll show you me shaping it, grinding it out, and then we'll go to that stage of heat treating it and then polishing it all up and bringing it to a usable standard. There's a lot that needs to happen to this with sanding and grinding off to get it to a usable state. But yeah, from a horseshoe you can make a knife, and it is usable, it is sharp, it will stay sharp for quite some time, but ultimately not nowhere near a carbon steeled bushcraft knife that you will be buying, even the lower quality ones. But yet, for me, run a sharpening stone over it now and again, off I go. And in fact, you should really carry a sharpening stone with you in the field. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring you along and show you what I'm doing with bushcraft knives here at the minute. Like I said, it's turned into a bit of a hobby, and I've got a feeling over my well, working life, I shall probably have a vast array of different styles and shapes of these by the time I get bored, fed up, or too old to do it. It's just become that little sideline hobby of mine. So yeah, just thought I'd bring you along and show you those. So take care, stay safe, hope to catch you guys on the trail.